Hey everybody, this is Mr. Crimshaw here. I am going to be talking to you today about 1773, the Boston Tea Party. Now, I think it's only important to start by explaining exactly what's going on here. Now, some of you have heard about the Boston Tea Party. Oh, the colonists dressed up like Indians, and they grabbed a bunch of tea off the boats, and they threw it into the Boston Harbor, and people were cheering and yelling and screaming and going all crazy. Actually, that's not quite how it happened. Most of that's true, but there's one there's a big difference, and I'm not going to tell you what that difference is right now. I'm going to instead start at the very beginning. What were the colonists protesting? So I think to best define who the colonists or what the colonists were protesting at that point in time is to define who they were. Who were the colonists? Well, they were actually British citizens, right? They were not Americans yet. A lot of people, especially even in movies, I've seen where they'll refer to the colonists as well, we are American citizens, or we're Americans. Actually, they were British. God save the Queen, all that stuff. Which I get it. They were not looking for recognition as Americans and having separate rights than British citizens. They just wanted their basic rights as British citizens. They didn't want any type of recognition as anything else. They wanted the same rights as those who lived in England. They wanted the same rights as those who as those who actually lived in their mother country, and they didn't want to be treated any less, or even really any more. So what were they protesting? A lot of people think that they were protesting the fact that they were being taxed. Well, that's not true. The fact of the matter was that when Samuel Adams and several of his friends created the Sons of Liberty, they took the majority. They took a majority of those who were disgruntled, and they gave that group a voice. And they were disgruntled about the fact that they were getting no representation in Parliament. Now, why was it that they were not getting any representation in Parliament? Okay, let me introduce you to King George III. King George III, when he was young, his mother gave him advice to be king. That little phrase there, be king. Be king meant don't let the colonists push you around, and don't let Parliament push you around. You are in charge. You tell them what to do. He almost took it back when England was all about the divine right of kings, right? He was almost that bad. The only thing that really kept him sane was his beautiful German wife, who was against him acting even more crazy than what he wanted to. And so this is the utmost tragedy. Now, after the French and Indian War, the colonists realized, because after the fighting, that they had done most of the defending, that they had done most of the rebuilding, and they really didn't need any government. And what I mean by that is they didn't really need the British to come in overseas and rebuild them or protect them, because they did it themselves. We call that self-government. Now, for anyone watching, if you're thinking I'm advocating anarchy, I'm not. Self-government is simply this. You can have government. Government's there. Government has two purposes: to reward the righteous, reward the good, and to punish the wicked. That's it. That's the purpose of government in a nutshell. But government grows whenever they see a need or an area that they can fill with regulation. And so the King of England didn't like the fact that and much of Parliament didn't like the fact that the colonists didn't seem to need England. They didn't seem to need to purchase things from England. In fact, the lumber industry here in the United States, we would cut down trees here, send the wood over to England, and then they would sell it back to us to build ships and to build buildings, to construct. This was a major issue. I mean, can you figure the insanity of that? Okay, let's cut down the tree, Bob. Sure. They knock it down. All right, ship it over to England. All right. Then they say, okay, we'll sell it back to you for double the price, and now you got to make ships for our Navy. Most of England's ships, the wood that was used to build them came from here in the colonies. And so England didn't like the fact that America didn't seem to need them. You see, the American colonists, the English colonists didn't seem to need them. And so King George III, and you can look up many of his quotes on the subject, he wanted to remind the colonists who was in charge. And so he began to allow Parliament, just allow Parliament, not him, Parliament. And that's a big difference. Because the colonists, they swore allegiance to Parliament, right? No, they swore it to the king, right? So these new taxes and stuff, they were coming in from Parliament, and the king was doing nothing. And so the colonists, they said, well, allow us to have representation then, to stand up. No. But it's our right. It's in the British Bill of Rights. No, you can't have it. You cannot have a representation, they said. And so what you end up having is a bit of a rebellion from groups of society. Now, mind you, at the start of this all, it was a very small segment. Many of the colonists, they were very patriotic. And when I mean by patriotic, I mean that they were proud English citizens. This movement started out very, very small. And then came the Boston Massacre. And then came the murder of an 11-year-old boy. It was an accidental shooting. The British magistrate shot through his window and struck the boy, killing him. And all these things culminated and started to gain and foster more resentment. But here at the Boston Tea Party, let me just kind of explain what happened here. Because a lot of people today are using the Boston Tea Party to kind of say, well, the riots that are happening all over America right now, this is reminiscent of the Boston Tea Party. No, it's not. Okay, and that's just an indictment on the public education system and the lack of teaching of history. Sorry, had to say it. Okay? When you go back and you read and you study and you read the first-hand eyewitness accounts of what happened here at the Boston Tea Party, it was not a riot. In fact, this picture that I'm showing you right now is actually very historically inaccurate. There's a couple things that are accurate. I'll show the accurate things first. You had the members of the Sons of Liberty and others who dressed up like Mohawk Indians, which I don't think that these are actual. I don't think these are the actual dress-up garbs for Mohawks, but they were colonists, so they probably wouldn't have known exact. And the fact that they're just throwing tea overboard and not destroying the ships, that is accurate. They were peaceful. When they got on those ships, they had a couple rules. They said, do not destroy private property. Okay? You can destroy the king's tea because he refused to repeal the tea tax. Okay? You had all these Townshend acts on things like glass and paper, etc., and tea. He repealed them all to appease the colonists and stop the boycotts, but tea. He said, no, tea, you guys have to know who's in charge. I'm going to allow the tea tax to stay. And so that's kind of what sparked this whole Boston Tea Party. Well, on the night that this occurred, Okay, and I like to do a lot of backtracking in my videos. You'll notice this. It's just that's just how I am. When we go back to when this Tea Party started, okay, you have quite a bit here. Let me just kind of show a couple things. So Sam Adams and other Sons of Liberty were holding a meeting in Liberty Hall. Okay, there in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm going to give you the short version of it. Basically, they were having this meeting. The British actually were outside, and this is from a first-hand account. The British were outside, and they really didn't want the colonists meeting in there, but they also didn't want the fight. So they decided instead to ring the fire bell, which would be like a fire alarm for us, but it was a big bell outside in town. One of them went over and rang it real loud to try to break up the meeting. Well, most of the people in the meeting, according to this young man that was there at the meeting, he said pretty much we were all on to what the British outside were doing, what the British redbacks, lobsterbacks were doing. And so we didn't leave. We stayed in there. And then it was Sam Adams and a few others that went ahead and said, we can do no more here. And then all of a sudden you hear these Indians, or you see these men dressed like Mohawk Indians making their way peacefully down to the wharf where these tea ships were. And so when they got there, there was no massive crowd. And there were some people watching, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't... there was no shooting, no one got beat up, no one got hurt, but they began to throw the tea off the ships. The British soldiers who were there. Now this is important. When you study history, you must go by first-hand accounts. Stop going by these new textbooks and these new authors who wish to revisit history. Go to the first-hand spoken accounts that there is recorded journal entries, because people back then, even men, kept journals. It was just the thing to do. Right? They didn't have Facebook and Instagram and all that other stuff to record their daily activities, like what they ate. But so they all kept journals, and that's actually really good because we can go there and see what was actually happening. So the British soldiers that were there said we had never seen a more peaceful protest than this. People were really well mannered. There was no violence. No one's private property got destroyed, so that means that these merchant ships, the owners, didn't lose their livelihood, right? They could still ship things and feed their kids back home. You know what I mean? This is a massive difference. You cannot compare the Boston Tea Party to what's going on today. Okay? You have rioting, and then you have actual liberty protesting, okay? Protesting for your rights that you are given by God, okay? Natural, unalienable rights. Go back and read that Declaration of Independence, or hey, even better yet, one document that a lot of people don't read is the American British Declaration of Rights and Grievances. Grievances, my goodness. Rights and Grievances. It lists in a very, very long list all the grievances that the colonists had against Parliament and the King, and so this is a massive piece of American history right here. Well, the King didn't like it, but it brought more people to the colonist side, and I want to show you this one point. Yes, the King and Parliament got angry about this, and they would retaliate with the Boston Port Bill, which locked down the ports of Boston, and trade couldn't come in, trade couldn't go out. The people of Boston began to starve to death. I mean, it was bad. But it rallied people to the Patriots' side. It rallied people to the Bostonian side in this argument. And that's the difference. You see, when George Floyd and all these people, if you had not already been, in favor of having more of a regulation on police brutality and that kind of stuff, then the George Floyd incident, that should have brought you over to it. And man, there were marches, and everyone was like, yeah, I mean, there should be. That's a legitimate, that's a problem. We need to fix these problems. But once the rioting started, you lost a lot of people, right? They lost a lot, the people that were trying to make a point. And you still have people who are trying to make a point. And we should stand by those people who are trying to make a point the legal way, the right way, the moral way. But you haven't, those that are trying to destroy things, look at this. That's not the way you do it. It's not the way you do it. Okay? You don't hurt private citizens. You don't hurt people that can't do anything about it. People are simply trying to feed their babies, feed their families. That's not how you do it. Okay? You don't hurt them and think you're going to make a change. In fact, what you're going to do is you're going to drive those people away, those businesses away, the people that are go-getters, the people that make society thrive. You're going to move those people away, and it's only going to get worse in the areas that they move away from. And that's my 2 cents. But the Boston Tea Party, this was a massive, massive protest that went very well, very peaceful. Okay, the only thing that got broke was a lock on one of the chests on the ship, and the member of the Sons of Liberty who broke it was forced by the other members, the other Tea Partiers, to pay for that lock. It was a peaceful protest, right? So now again, the only thing I would say is probably not accurate here are the crowds and crowds and crowds of people cheering and stuff. It was actually very quiet, according to some of the people that actually saw it going on and happening. It was actually very, very quiet. They didn't really want a lot of people to draw a ton of attention to what was going on, and so they were just going to dump the tea overboard and into the water without much ado. So, all right. I knew I said in my last video that I was going to try to keep these short. If you're a member of any of my classes, you know that me keeping anything short is almost impossible. So I will say goodbye. Have a great day. And remember, be proud to be an American.